Thank you so much for joining us. I am Larissa. I'm one of the staff at the Council for Professional Recognition. I'm on the Learning, Design, and Experience team. And I am really excited to be talking to a friend of mine who also fits this month's CAN theme, which is, of course, celebrating Pride. And this is Kevin. Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Kevin is part of a couple. His husband's name is Chris, and they have a family, and they have just recently gone through the preschool system with their daughter, Sophie. And I just wanted to talk to them. Well, right now we're talking to just Kevin. We may have some special guests as it rolls along. I wanted to talk to Kevin about his experience with the preschools and being a gay couple and being a family that's maybe non-traditional, and how that was treated and what they went through, and just see if they have any words of advice for anybody or what else we discover. So Kevin, I really appreciate you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
Sure. So Kevin, if you could give me a description of your family, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely. So my husband and I met about 13 years ago, and we've been married for 11 years now at this point, almost 11 years. We decided pretty early on that we wanted to be parents. And so a few years into our relationship, we actually started the adoption process. We had it as a roller coaster of a process. We actually were placed 6 years ago with our oldest daughter, Sophie, who is now in kindergarten, but as recently as last year was enrolled in a preschool program. And then when she was around 2 years old, we actually started the process again for a sibling. And it has taken many years at this point. But actually 2 months ago, we were placed with a new baby sister who is not too far from me getting fed. And so her name is Ellie. So we have a 6-year-old and a 2-month-old. So.
Oh, well, I bet the house is a little chaotic right now.
It is. It is. It's always, but it's a fun chaos. Yes.
That's good. That's awesome. So I really wanted to talk to you today about your experience with Sophie going through preschool. Before we get to that though, can you tell me a little bit more about Sophie?
Yes. So Sophie, we are a multiracial family. Both my husband and I are Caucasian. Our daughter, Sophie, is African-American, and our new baby, Ellie, is actually Latina. She is Guatemalan. Sophie is a very bold, spiritual person. My Spitfire. She is definitely a type A individual, very similar to how I am. So she's like my little mini me. She's always been extremely smart. Everything happened for her early. She was walking at 9 months to the day. I remember that because it happened to be Thanksgiving morning, November 25th. And she was born in February. She learned her ABCs early. She learned sign language as a very young toddler. All the fun ones, more and all done and all that stuff. So she's always just been a very advanced child. We had her home with a nanny to start, and we were with the intention of enrolling her always in programs at 3 years old, 4 years old. Obviously, COVID hit when she was 3, and so for actually 2. So we really didn't have a lot of time to get her into a program, and actually she wound up staying home a little longer than we probably would have wanted. But when she was 4 years old, programs had started opening back up. And so we did. At that point, we were very attached with our nanny, and we wanted to keep her as we knew we were going to adopt again. And so we, instead of putting her into a full-time program, we wound up doing a 3-day-a-week part-time program just to kind of get everyone's feet wet. We didn't think that going from not being in any program and being in the home to then being 5 days a week into a preschool program, was the right move. So we kind of eased into it. We found a part-time program was about 4 hours, 3 times a week, through Fairfax County. So when she was 4 years old, she went through that program, and it runs the same length as the Fairfax County school system, it's public school system. So it starts about a week after, and then the school starts, and it ends a week before the Fairfax County school system ends. And so it is at one of the rec centers. They have classrooms at the rec centers. And there were 2 preschool classes. There was a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and there was a Tuesday, Thursday. And we did the Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. So it was, and that was our experience with her. So
wonderful. So
yeah.
Just a caveat for our audience, Chris and Kevin are in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC. Fairfax County is in Virginia, and that will play a part, I think, in what we talk about a little bit in the future. But I would just love to hear overall, what did you think of the program? How was the experience in general? And then we'll get into some details about.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say we really enjoyed the program on the whole. I will say that the program was pretty diverse, which is fantastic. We happen to live in a very diverse community outside of the District of Columbia, so diversity is something that we always look for as a multiracial family, right? We want to make sure that we are always inclusive in our own life, and so we're always looking for opportunities to expose our children to other cultures and things like that. And so the program was extremely, I would say, inclusive with a lot of multiracial families. We really enjoyed the teachers. You know, they truly love what they do. A lot of them were kind of retired school teachers or people who wanted to just they have part-time gigs, but they were really phenomenal. There was a set curriculum. You know, it was I don't know exactly what their curriculum was, but there was a curriculum, so it was very much like a school feel to it, where they learned not only just kind of like some of the listening skills and life skills and some of the social skills, but they were also working on numbers, and there was a letter of the week and colors of the week and very thematic things. So it almost felt like school to me. Like we had to like do Spirit Week and whatever, and send her to school with like this was like dress day or something. And so it was very much, it felt very academic to me, as like almost like a school program. So we really enjoyed that part of that aspect of the program.
That's wonderful. Sounds very robust, hopefully fulfilling for the children. My question, sort of bringing it back to the theme of the month, did you ever feel that being part of a gay family made you stand out at the school, or did it ever cause you any problems?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say any problems. I will say that when we come to any event, wherever we go, we're, I would say, a conspicuous family. Right? Because we're a multiracial family. We are household. We're head by two dads. We don't go unnoticed anywhere we go. So we were the only gay couple family that was led by two parents, gay parents, whether that be gay males or lesbians. So but that's not uncommon for us to kind of go into the situations. I would say that I never felt any different. I will say that the teachers, there are two teachers who were both extremely big. They were both very big supporters of the LGBTQI community as well as BLM. So I would see them in shirts and things. And there were two kind of older Caucasian ladies, which was a very pleasant surprise. And so they were very much about inclusion to the point where early on in our tenure there, we'd said like, they'd said to us like, "What are you called? Are you daddy? Are you papa? Are you what is Sophie refer to you both as individually?" So that when we are referring to her parents, we can make sure that we are not mistitling you. Which is amazing, because sometimes even when I go into our own doctor's office, like if a nurse doesn't know us, she's like, "Oh, where's mom?" And I'm like, literally like in Florida, right? Like she's nowhere near, right? And I'm like, well, and I'm always like, "Oh, well, my husband is someplace else," right? So that happens because some people just don't think like that. I would say that the two teachers that were there really truly did think like that, and made sure that they understood what my title was versus his and how we get referred to in our own household. And the way they structured curriculum was very much like, let's talk about parents, or like who raises us. When they come home with like projects of like, where did I come from, or who's parenting me. They were very much about that kind of inclusive life. The only thing that I thought was a downside was really not on the school's program directly itself, but was more on the how kind of the paperwork was handled through the county, and like emergency contact forms, everything. A lot of that through the county was like mom and dad, and we had and then we kind of brought that to the attention of the head of the school, who ran the school, administrator or whatever, and she was like, "It's a well-known like challenge that we have with the paperwork as well." And it's like you have to move the county further along in the culture process to really start to get them to think like that, and revise their paperwork, which is a little more than just the school itself, right? I think if the school said they had worked, if they were kind of more independent of the larger county, that they would have kind of adjusted and fixed that. So, but that was something that we made sure to bring attention because, like, I just kind of wrote through it and put like dad one, dad two kind of stuff. But so that was the only kind of time I ever felt like, all right, like we're maybe not as inclusive as we should be. And it was but it wasn't like it's not something that we're unaccustomed to, right? And we handle the situations as we need to. But no, in individually, independent of the class itself, we never ever felt like there was anything that we was any challenges for us.
And can we just say, like, let's take a minute to celebrate that, because
Yeah.
even like 5 or 6 years ago, that probably wouldn't have been your answer.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting to hear that, like, we took steps to include you, and we took steps to learn what you prefer to be called, and we want to talk to Sophie in the language that she uses at home, and that kind of stuff. And so that's very exciting, and I'm just so glad to hear that, because like not every story that has to do with pride or inclusivity has to be a drama.
Yeah.
And that's
Sure.
so wonderful. So that's really exciting to hear. And I was gonna say, it also makes sense that the school board or the school slash county slash bureaucracy part is a little further behind. We get that. And the reason I said that you being in Northern Virginia would play a part in this is because we still are in the South. We still are in Virginia. I feel like, and you can speak to this because you're from a little further south as well. I feel like that may not be the experience everywhere.
Sure. I mean, I think you know there are places that are safe for the LGBTQI community, and there are places that aren't, and we all know what's happening in Florida and Texas, right, and even Tennessee, and so it's hard enough in those situations being just someone of that community, or just being a partnered person in that community. There's another layer to it when you have children, right, and you are a family unit. And if you dissolve our marriage, right, or whatever, what does that mean for not just us as individuals, but now we have two minors, we have two children, right? And so as a parent, we always have to think about our kids first, right? And so for us, it's a little challenging because we always have to make sure that we live in a community, or right, that is accepting enough, right, of us, that do not feel like our family is going to be threatened or our children are going to have any problems, right? And so we have to be a little more selective at where we can live, and the programs that we put our children into, right? From a preschool perspective, there are lots of closer preschool programs to our home that we could have enrolled her in, around the corners from us at churches and things like that. But not knowing how the family would be perceived at some of those, kind of religious sponsored preschools, right? Put us on edge a little bit. And so we had to research the program, right? And we had to make sure and understand that we were protecting our daughter and ourselves first, and so we do have to think about and be a little more selective sometimes. And not only like, where we live, but even the programs we live in. And look, Northern Virginia is yes, more LGBTQI friendly, but that's not like universal everywhere all the time, right? And so we always make sure that we have to do our research about what are the types of programs and things like that we can put her into, that we are going to make sure that everyone in our family is always safe, and that we're never going to have any problems, or that Sophie's not going to have any pushback, right?
Yeah. And I want to caveat, I think I've said something like this before in other interviews. I am not denigrating the South. It's just certain areas tend to be more traditionally valued.
Sure.
And this can happen anywhere in this country, north, south, east, west, whatever.
Mhm.
I need to say that.
No, absolutely. Although I have one little pushback on, I don't know what traditional means, because we're right. So
That's
define
why I use,
traditional. Yeah,
right?
we're a Christian. We are a Christian Episcopal, right? We are Episcopalians, and we are
Right.
we're, I don't know what traditional really means. We celebrate all the Christian holidays. We go to church. Our children are baptized. So Traditional is I think a really loaded word too, but I totally understand.
And I think it's really important that you point that out, because as we get into more inclusivity, and learning about how to truly be inclusive, which means, if people don't understand what inclusivity really means, it means accommodating for others. And that's something that I always like, yeah, inclusive, right? Like, yeah, everybody. But it wasn't until I actually started teaching about inclusivity that I was like, oh, it literally means changing to accept others and to give them the same opportunities as anybody else. And I think part of that is in changing our language. And we're in a really interesting time right now where our languages are morphing and changing, and there's pushback, and sometimes people have the best of intentions, like traditional,
Yeah.
without knowing exactly the right word to say, which should just be
Family. Yeah.
right. But there's this need to still label and box things, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that's really interesting, and that's definitely something that's good for our teachers and the people who are watching this, our audience in general, to think about as they interact with anybody. But as we're talking about pride right now, especially like our LGBTQ friends, So I just I'm really glad you pointed that out. So you mentioned the curriculum, that the teachers were really trying to like speak about who was Papa and who was Daddy and that kind of stuff. But did any of their assignments, or did any of their posters on the wall or anything, did it ever really represent Sophie and what she sees on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think in the assignments that the teachers would do themselves, they would make sure that that piece was inclusive. As far as like the tools that they were given as teachers, right? The books in the classrooms or the posters on the wall, right? Like, the posters and things like that in the classroom, like we didn't see any kind of like, family that looked or resembled ours, right? But I would say on the whole, like they tended to go for a more, I'll say, agnostic approach to that, right? Like there was no, but what I didn't see was like, two parent, mom, dad, and a kid poster or anything. Like we didn't see anything like that, right? So that was kind of, but what they would have on the wall was, very different. And like, they would talk about like families of fruits or things like, right? So they kind of used other things to represent, I think, familial relationships. However, in like the book side of the house, right, like the books that are there in the classroom, things like that, while there was no kind of, I'll say, heteronormative propaganda, right, in books. I would say that there wasn't anything overtly inclusive either, right? And so the types of books they read, but it's not my and maybe this is a sad thing, right? My expectation as a gay dad is not that my kid's going to go to a program and find inclusive books and literature, right? And so we view that, my husband and I, as like something that we need to do, right? So at a minimum. And so we are always on the hunt for literature, age appropriate books and things like that, right? For our daughter, where she can see herself represented and our family structure representative in those books. And so we actually have a lot of that at home to make sure that we're always talking about what a family looks like and what our family looks like, to make sure that like there's a little girl, there's a little black girl, and there's two dads, right? And so we look for that kind of literature. We have actually also, there are websites where they have books and you get to put in hair colors and skin colors and like parent structures and like names. And so we've actually, and our some of our close relatives and friends have actually gone and made books where like her name is in the book and the girl in the book looks like her, right? Or like, or there's a book with like two dads that kind of similarly look like us. So while that's obviously more on the like that's not readily available and it's a little more expensive to do something like that, right? Like, we feel it's important that she sees that representation, and so we make sure that we do it at home. So, but would it be nice in a program? if that kind of inclusive literature was there. Absolutely, right? Because then, as I think it wouldn't just be that she's learning it from us in our own home. Then she would feel, right, like, as you said, inclusion is making room for other people, right, and really starting to accept that. And so to see other people outside of our immediate family structure also seeing that, oh, I have the book at home, I've seen that before, right, I think would start to paint the right picture of like, oh, this is a little more acceptable, or like I see myself, and other people can also see me as well. But yeah, we don't expect it, but it would certainly be a lovely thing to have.
I love that other people can see me part. That's what representation is all about.
Mhm.
That is why it's important that we've had uh, a new Black Ariel in the Little Mermaid, or why even in Frozen they have, I think it was Frozen 2 or something, like they had a gay couple as parents. And like, this stuff may seem minor to some people and may seem major to some people, but to calibrate it and bring it back to the middle, it's about letting children see themselves represented.
Mhm.
Right. And so it would be really neat to have more of that, like, in the classroom as well. And I love that you bring the books and you do the development on your own. And that's one of the things I was going to ask you about is, like, how do you talk to Sophie about why your family may look different than other people, right? Which you've kind of told me already, like, she has other families that don't look like what you see necessarily on like TV or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
How do you talk to her about that and start developing her
yeah.
understanding of that?
In our situation, when the household is led by two dads, it doesn't take long for any child in that household to realize that, like, our family structure does not even look like our own neighbors,
Mhm.
right? And kids are curious, right? Kids are never malicious, right? Especially at this age, especially 6 and below, right? There's no real malicious intent behind these little kids, but they have questions. And so, it's our job to make sure that she's always armed and prepared for the answers to those questions, right? But like, very early on, she realized we weren't the same skin color, right? And in fact, she was probably 3 years old when she said to us, like, maybe it was 4, but she said, "Oh, she asked, why am I brown and you're beige?" And I was like, "Well, first of all, how did we get to beige?" And I'm thrilled that, like, that's what she said, right? And I was like, "Where'd you learn the color beige?" But it was very early on where she noticed immediately, right? And asked questions. And so, you have the conversations that your child can handle, and that is age appropriate and maturity level appropriate for them to understand. She's always been really mature from a really young age. She's just kind of beyond her years. And so we are kind of really open and honest with her, to what we think is appropriate about her adoption story, and how we came to be a family. The other thing is, we're really connected to her birth mom. That's not always the situation that everyone can be in. Every situation is different. But in ours, we really are lucky and fortunate that, like, there's still connection to birth mom. And so, we talk to her, at maximum quarterly, or as often as monthly, over FaceTime. So, like, she has seen her. We have FaceTimed with older siblings, familial siblings. So, like, she understands, that piece. And it's just like her little family kind of world grows. Right. And so, we expressed at a really early age, like, what adoption is, and like why we did it. And that we are a family unit. And I think kids only know what they're taught, right? And they're sponges. And so, we just make sure that whatever we talk about our story and how we become a family and how we are a family, is age appropriate. And I will tell you, our worlds were rocked 2 months ago with this other placement very quickly. And obviously, our second daughter here is Guatemalan, right? Our family's going to look different as well, and so that reopened up some conversations about, you know, how are we siblings if we don't look alike? How are we all related? One of the neighborhood kids asked us, do they have different mommies? And we had to like answer questions, right? And you can't be frustrated with it. You don't get emotional behind it, because they don't know any better. They just want to know, right? And it's funny because you answer the question, you say like, well, this is the answer to that question, and the kids just go, oh, okay, and they just move on, right? And it's hard for the adults to grasp, because we're the ones who have stigmas, we have opinions, we have whatever's holding over our own heads about what we think about people and view people and our own judgments of people, right? That's hard to break as an adult. But kids have none of that. And so when she's dealing with kids her own age, it's just like, oh, okay. I mean, truly, that's the experience. That's been our experience even in our kindergarten program this year. And she's in an after school Taekwondo program, which she, absolutely loves. And the kids just go, they have questions, they ask them, they get their answers. And now they may or be a little more inclusive themselves, because the next time they see a family like ours, they know, oh, well, I know somebody like that, right? That's the important part of inclusion, right? Is that we're not going away, right? No matter what happens politically in this country, right? Our family's never going to go away, right? We're here, right? And so you to teach anything other than acceptance is frankly immoral in itself, in my opinion, right? Because this is our family structure. It's always going to be our family structure, right? And so are you gonna treat my daughters differently, right? Because you don't agree with kind of my lifestyle. That they didn't do anything to you, like they're innocent in in all of this, right? And they're going to be well-adjusted children, right? Because we're trying to do all the right things so that they are compassionate and they are inclusive, and they can answer the questions and teach other people. What we wind up doing as adoptive parents in this community, in the LGBTQI community, is we really become like the poster children for adoption and for our families. And so, when she was a lot younger and we would get lots of questions, right? It used to really bother me that we're getting so many questions, right? Because it was kind of like, just leave me alone. And nowadays I kind of view it as like, people are just inquisitive. And if I don't teach someone, right, and I don't show them like, yeah, this is normal, then maybe they don't walk away with the same sense of like, oh, this is just Kevin and Chris, right? And this should be normal in most people's minds. So we really entertain the questions from people about all of this kind of stuff, right? Because we feel like we are also representing a community, right? And
Yeah.
so we're always putting our best foot forward. We're always making sure that we are answering questions that people have of us,
Mhm.
right? And we want to make sure that Sophie is armed, and of course our other daughter, as she gets older, right, to be able to answer those questions, so that it's just so people related to, oh, okay, and then they move on, and maybe we can all move forward as a nation, as a world, right? And this is just not, it doesn't seem like we're not a traditional family anymore, right?
Correct. Correct. At the end of the day, it is two parents who love their children and two
Absolutely.
children who love their parents. What is less traditional than that to me,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And there's so much I want to say because I'm adopted too. And I've always said that if you just are honest with kids, straightforward, and just tell them how things are, they'll just go, okay.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that'll be it. It doesn't have to be the drama that we think it is. But
Yeah.
if you don't tell them,
Yes. Yeah.
that's when they start learning the stigmas, the hatred, the whatever it may be, the discrimination,
Mhm.
or the othering of people, right?
I love that. Yes, the othering, and I 100%. I love that term. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so important to me as being within this education industry, but also I'm in the makeup industry, and I never want someone to feel othered by me because I don't have the product to put on their face that's going to match them, or that I can't mix it to make it appropriate. Like that is to me like my worst nightmare. But and not from a guilty, oh woe is me standpoint. I don't want them feeling that way, right? Because unfortunately it happens too often. And it's just so important that we can just be people.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's so important. And I feel like we could talk forever.
Yeah.
Ever. I mean, actually, I know we could because I know you, and I know.
That's right.
Is there anything else that you feel it would be important to share with like these educators?
Yeah. I think, kind of one last thought. It's kind of to your last point of, right, you don't ever want someone to feel othered. I would say that folks in minority status, right? I think a lot of times we set our expectations of what we're going into for anything, right? Lower, right? Because like we expect to be othered, if you will. And so it's really refreshing and an amazing feeling for not only us as parents, but for our kids when you don't when you show up someplace, or you have an experience where the inclusion is there, right? And you're immediately pleasantly surprised that you're not othered. Because a lot of times we just set the bar of like, I'm not gonna get, like, or we're gonna walk, like I said, like I'm not expecting to see inclusive books. So if I go into a classroom and I see books of inclusion and I see all kinds of families represented in books, that is, you just feel better about yourself, about the family. You feel better about, right? Like it just it sets a bar higher for you. But a lot of times we just don't. We set the expectations lower about what we're going to encounter. So to protect yourselves, right? To protect your emotions, your heart, your family, whatever, right? And so to go into a situation, a classroom situation, and have teachers be inclusive without having to ask for it, to have books and literature that's inclusive without having to demand it at school board meetings, yes, right? Like it starts to make you feel more like a normal American citizen, right?
Yeah.
And so like, and that there's almost pride from other folks that you're here and we see you, right? And that's the feeling that we're looking for at the end of the day. Like that's what everyone wants, like because um, you know, we never want especially for our children, we never want them to feel like they can't be part of the greater, right? Because of where we come from in our background as a family. And so I would just want to leave folks with that, is like anything that people can do,
Yeah.
even if it's little things, right? A lot of us will set the expectations kind of low of what we think we're going to get or see. And so if we come in these classrooms and see that there's more and more and more, it validates, right? And makes you feel more comfortable as a parent in the programs that we're sending our children to. So
Absolutely. And I think just to piggyback on that, you mentioned two different things, and I think it's important to distinguish between them. There's acknowledgement, which is good most of the time, not always, but then there's being seen.
Sure.
Acknowledging somebody, great, good, but making it so that they feel seen without making it a spectacle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Is important.
Yeah. I don't think that anyone's ever asking for like, we need a whole unit on our family structure. That's never the case, right? We don't need everyone to go. It doesn't have to be so. It's never about like we need everyone to just learn about us. It's just that she needs to see herself represented, her family structure represented, without having to ask for it, right? But other family, but I'm okay if she sees Muslim families and represented. Like I want that exposure because I want that kind of acceptance, right? And I want her to be, her be inclusive and empathetic, right? Like what are we parenting our children for if we don't want that for them, right? I mean, who says they don't want that for their children? I don't know that anyone would say that, right? It's going it's going a little bit above and beyond. It doesn't have to be, like, to your point, it doesn't have to be in your face. That's never that's not what we want.
We're not asking for a parade. We're not
No,
asking for rainbow flags all over the classroom. We're not
no,
asking, no, like what we're asking for is just to let them see themselves in what's being represented.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, you're Kevin, your
Yes.
husband is Chris, your daughter is Sophie, and your other daughter is Ellie. That's the family unit.
That's
And
right.
very happy that you could just join me on this and really explain, the situation, what it's like, and honestly show that things are getting better, but show that we have some work to do too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larissa.